Come, chat with Nicholas. He'll listen to you. Then he'll laugh, and then he'll cry with you. It's all in a safe space for you to speak your truth. Oh, come let's chat with Nick.
Hello, everyone. Today we've got Jason Barnard with us, and he is the brand SERP guy. For those who don't know what SERP is, it's the search engine result page. So that's a more technical term, but something we digital marketers know quite a lot about. So, Jason, great to have you on here. And maybe to start, where on earth are you in the world?
Oh, thank you for having me, Nicholas. I'm in the south of France at the moment, near Montpellier, near Nîmes, living the high life with great food, great wine, and music.
Okay, well, you can see the sun slowly starting to go down now in Oslo. But I am a bit envious of the wine in your part of the world. So, yeah, brilliant. Good on you. Today we're going to chat about, as I mentioned, SERP, because it's in your title. So let's talk a bit about that. But you've had quite a storied career, from being obviously a marketing man, but also being on a kids show, being a traveling musician, traveling around the world, and being sort of an itinerant marketer, if I can put it that way. So maybe let's talk about how you got into marketing, and maybe just a brief backstory on you.
Right. Yeah. Lovely question. I mean, I actually did a degree in economics in Liverpool, and I was a musician even back then, and I played the Cavern Club, which was a moment of great glory, although it doesn't make me a better musician. It was just fun to say I played the Cavern Club where the Beatles started out.
Yeah.
Wow. Moved to Paris and became a musician there, playing the double bass, contrabass, for anybody who doesn't necessarily know what a double bass is. In America, I think they call it a bull fiddle. And then moved on to make cartoons for kids. And you mentioned earlier on Mauritius. We moved to Mauritius and then back to France, where I became a marketer. I then went fully digital nomad and traveled around the world twice. And so, as you can see, from the moment I left home in Leeds in the north of England, through Liverpool, Paris, Mauritius, back to France, south of France, around the world twice, back to south of France again, I've never really settled down. I've never really stopped moving. And I've never had a proper 9-to-5 job.
So I think in the type of career that you're in, obviously with music, you can travel around. Yeah. But when it comes to marketing, how has that changed for you in, let's say, since 2010? Well, since social media really started picking up. When did you really pick up on social media, and how did that change the way that you saw marketing or applied yourself to marketing?
Right. Well, I actually started in marketing with the cartoon, and that was in 1998. And what happened is my ex-wife and I created a cartoon for kids called Bouwa and Koala. And we couldn't get any of the record companies, any of the publishers, any of the TV companies interested in our super duper Bouwa and Koala idea. And it was a blue dog and a yellow koala. And so we built a website using Flash, which is an animation software, and basically built kids' games online. And it was like a CD-ROM, but online and for free. And we marketed it by dominating Google. So that's why I've come into the Google space with the search engine results page, but also marketing it by putting the characters into the places where the kids and the parents would see them, which is schools, libraries, and other resources of kids' entertainment and kids' educational content. And I stopped doing that in 2008. And so I kind of missed the social media aspect from that perspective. Yeah. And just focused on Google and being in schools and libraries and in the places where the kids and the parents were looking.
So I saw in the notes that you had sort of a couple of 100 million views on your site. So I mean, that must have in those days that was quite something.
The numbers were stunning. I actually just talked about it. I was talking to a few people about scaling. Yeah, and we went from 0 to 1 billion page views in under 10 years. And we were living in Mauritius, where there are no qualified web developers or web server managers. So I had to learn to do it myself.
Yeah.
So I was sitting on a tropical island with a blue dog and a yellow koala. Our address was between the sea and the post office, Mauritius. And I had to manage 1 billion page views, i.e. 5 million kids every single month for a year, each one staying on the site for an average of 20 minutes and looking at 20 pages.
And using Flash, which thank heavens we no longer have to deal with, I guess.
I would disagree. I loved Flash.
Okay.
If you're building a website for kids where you're building games, Flash is the best thing in the entire universe.
Ah, okay.
So in one particular circumstance, I think I'm probably the only person who still likes it. But I thought it was brilliant, and it gave me a career, and it gave me a hugely successful career and a website of games for kids.
Yeah.
So I can only love Flash.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they just unceremoniously yanked it from the web. So that was quite, I'm sure that's a story in itself. Now, you spoke about focusing on Google or using Google in the early days. How has your experience with Google changed over the last 15 or so years? We've now got GA4 coming out. Well, it's out already, and everyone's had to move over from Universal Analytics. You're obviously quite strong in the Google side. How has your experience with Google changed from the early days to now?
Well, I've kind of grown with Google. Google launched in 1998 as a company, and we launched our first kids games online 3 months later.
Wow.
So I started with Google, and I've seen Google grow. I've seen Google evolve. I've seen Google change, and it's been hugely interesting because what I've seen is that they have created the technology over the years, step by step, to be able to do what they initially wanted to do anyway. And one of those things, which I find hugely interesting, is build a machine-readable encyclopedia with every fact on Earth.
Yeah.
And they're obviously not there now, but they started with the idea and they just had to build the technology to be able to do it. And now they have the technology and they're in the process of doing it. And what that means from my perspective is my job has become 1 billion times more interesting. Because when Google was stupid, let's say, 15 years ago, it was just about counting words and counting links. Yeah. Now it's about educating a machine, which is what we do at KaliCube. We educate Google so that our information, factual information, gets into its machine-readable encyclopedia. And if you look at an encyclopedia, you think, okay, Wikipedia, big, 50 million articles. Google's Knowledge Graph, which is its machine-readable encyclopedia, contains at least 1,500 billion facts. So it's absolutely off the charts, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're here to educate it.
And I guess that's why Google isn't particularly perturbed by ChatGPT, because it's all running off Google information anyway, or information that's typically being gleaned off Google. Now, you mentioned KaliCube. Why don't we go into a little bit of the background of KaliCube and how that came about, and what the name stands for as well?
Oh, right. Yeah, the name, it's delightful. I started it with a friend of mine who's now left the company, but we discussed this for a long time. And then there's a whole debate about, do we pick a name that describes what we do, or do we pick a unique name that nobody else is using? And it's a huge decision to make at the start of a company. We've actually got a couple of articles about it where I discuss the advantages and disadvantages of each. And so we chose to find a name that nobody else was using. And the other additional problem was that we're in France, so it needed to work in French and in English. And KaliCube, KaliCube, Kali, quality, cube, solid.
Okay.
So from my perspective, KaliCube represents solid quality, and then our logo is a falcon, a multicolored falcon. And from that perspective, then it means varied and soaring into the sky with glorious results. And it's all in my mind.
Yeah.
Nobody else sees this.
Well, I mean, that's the job of, the brand professionals, is to make sure they take those key points that you mentioned there and, educate first of all, your internal audience, your staff and your customers, and then the rest of the world. So that's very exciting. I love the naming process. Coming from the branding background, and working at Interbrand and Wunderbrand and a couple of other agencies, we've created a lot of names. And at Interbrand in particular, I think the game company the whole raft of different companies have come out of these branding agencies with millions of dollars sometimes spent on coming up with the right name. And as you mentioned, making sure that the name doesn't mean something else in another language, like that disastrous Coca-Cola, translation in China, which I think meant to bite the wax tadpole, which is always a hilarious one when they transliterated it. So yeah, very, very interesting process there. So in KaliCube, you talk about teaching Google to be better or to use your data better. Let's go into that in a little bit more detail.
Right, yeah. Google wants to understand the world. And so we can look at it as a small child who just doesn't understand. And that's what Buwan Koala was all about. It was a blue dog and a yellow koala, where the yellow koala just didn't understand the world. The yellow koala wasn't stupid. It just needed to learn, and it needed somebody kind to explain it, and that was Buwa. Okay. So for me, Google is koala, and KaliCube is Buwa. This is my new idea that I've just come up with. And Buwa is guiding Google to understand the world, or the small corner of the world that KaliCube occupies, or our clients occupy. Yeah. So what we will do is say to a client, well, what is your brand? What is your marketing? Who are your audience? What we're going to now do is educate Google about that so it understands. So the blue dog then takes your information and provides it to the yellow koala in a way the yellow koala can understand. And that means the yellow koala Google, sorry, I'm getting confusing now, but Google the child who is a yellow koala in this particular scenario can then explain your brand in your words, and you maintain your brand narrative even though somebody's talking to Google. And somebody called Theodora Petkova mentioned to me the other day something I find hugely interesting, is we must never forget that we are humans talking to other humans. But all of these social media platforms and Google are simply intermediaries. And what we need to do is make sure that we're talking to the human on the other side through this intermediary. And the intermediary is actually projecting our voice, our brand narrative. And that's hugely difficult to do. That's what we do at KaliCube. And I absolutely love it. And since she said that, it was literally 2 weeks ago. Okay. It's changed my perception of what we're doing. We're basically making sure that the filter that Google represents between us and the people on the other side we're trying to talk to doesn't filter out the things that are important to us and to our audience, and that it represents us fairly, honestly, and with our brand narrative and our brand voice. Yeah. And, brand narrative and brand voice can get lost with all of this user-generated content that's out there as well. I think a lot of businesses are starting to rely more and more on people sharing content, etc. But then you lose control over the message, and we can't really put that genie back in the bottle necessarily. One of the things I've seen change in Google, and I think one of the big changes that we're going to see in the next couple of years, is augmented reality, where I know their goggles and their glasses were a bit of a failure, but I do feel that that's going to make a resurgence. I think virtual reality and meta, the meta universe is going to have a tough time, but augmented reality in terms of using the Google lens, using voice more, we're going to find more and more people not having to go onto Google to find out websites. They're going to be using, their goggles. They're going to be using their devices or using it in real time, moving their phone about in the world. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that is the next sort of logical step? And do websites need to change? Do how we
ending up on a search page. It might not be landing up on a search page anymore, on a desktop, but it's going to, how do we get ourselves, in front of people's eyeballs in this new AR age?
Yeah, I understand. It's a great question. From that perspective, we're looking at search generative experience on Google, which is rolling out in the US and will be rolled out in the rest of the year, rest of the world probably by the end of the year. And that's the start, is that what Google then does is it takes its search results and it takes its knowledge of the world and its machine readable encyclopedia, and it presents its interpretation of that information. So the machine is now interpreting what we're providing. And so you mentioned websites, and I think that's hugely important. We have to change our perspective of websites, because the website is, in this particular scenario, merely a way for us to communicate to Google and the other machines what it is we offer to whom, why we're credible, and when we can be useful, when we have a solution for them. At which point the website needs to exist because we need to feed these machines algorithms, Google, goggles, and so on and so forth. And then we need to understand that they will send the user, and remember, it's their user. It might be our audience, but it's their user.
Yeah.
They will send that user to our website when the website is useful to the user, i.e. when they're ready to convert. So the funnel is going to become detached from your website, but your website needs to exist because you need to explain the funnel to these machines so that they can reproduce the funnel in all of these different environments that you mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
I think it's hugely interesting.
Yeah.
And some people are saying, oh, I'll just stop my website. And you're saying, no, you have to educate the machines, because if you don't tell them what your funnel is, they can't bring people down the funnel to your website.
Yeah, well, I was having a chat yesterday with a very interesting person, and we were talking about Pinterest, Instagram, and companies like that, where it's not new, but you can see a photograph you like of a sweater, glasses, etc., and directly from that image you can click through and buy that product directly. So to your point, websites are going to be more like databases. Dynamic databases than a set website that somebody goes and trawls on. And in terms of most businesses, nobody really cares about your business. They only care about a solution or product or a service that is going to deliver value for them or solve a problem. So I think this movement away from having just standard websites where you're hoping people are going to come onto it, towards going and putting your product where people are and where they're most likely to buy it is very interesting. And that's where SERP is going to change, I guess, over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's going to hugely change, but that doesn't mean to say we can't use it. What we do at KaliCube, I've built KaliCube Pro, which is a SaaS platform that analyzes Google's search results to understand your brand, its position in the market, and your audience, and then designs for you the digital strategy that will allow you to stand where the audience is looking, wherever it is online.
Yeah.
So we can actually delightfully use Google to understand our own digital ecosystem, our own digital strategy, and use Google's results to improve that.
Yeah, well, I'm a big Google fan. I've had iPhones. I'm on a Mac right now, but I use Chrome, I use Gmail, I use all of the platforms that they have, and obviously I use Google Ads. I use their business manager. Basically any service that Google has. I know it's going to work. So there are lots of naysayers saying that Google might go down the tubes with AI and ChatGPT. But to your point, they are the biggest knowledge repository in the world. Where do we think all of these AI bots and that are getting their data from? And even ChatGPT, when you ask something and it summarizes a point, it's had to trawl through however many websites on Google to generate a summary. And I think if your brand story is the strongest brand story, your story will be the main story that comes out on Bing or on ChatGPT. And I think that's a powerful
exactly
story.
It. That's beautifully said, and that's what we're trying to advocate. Is you need to be a brand. You need to be understood as a brand. Your brand story needs to be clear to these machines, and your brand story needs to be strong, which is your point. And as soon as that happens, they will tell the world about you.
Yeah.
So we have to focus on brand, not website. Google and all of these other machines want to know who is behind the website, which company, which brand, which person. So it's all about brand. And that's where we're going, which is wonderful for you and I, because that's exactly where we're sitting.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the next iteration of Google and the next iteration of search, because it's all, I think if one looks at Google and the other platforms, their goal is to give the customer the best possible outcome or what they're looking for. And we as marketers need to help brands make sure that our products are out in front of them. I want to go back a little bit to the digital nomad side.
Yeah.
COVID changed, I think, a lot of people's perceptions on work and where they're, not having to work in an office, being stuck at home, not having engagement with people face to face. Being a digital nomad for you, do you think you missed out on having a work environment, or what are the pros and cons of being not a one-man band, but being your own boss and being able to travel around the world? Maybe look at some of the positives and negatives for that, for folks who are thinking, let me give up being a salary person and sitting on a desk. I'm going to go and travel the world like Jason.
Well, I think there are two different scenarios, one of which is sitting at home, working from home. The disadvantage is you're quite isolated, and you can often have difficulties motivating yourself. You get distracted by the washing up or cleaning the bathroom or whatever it might be. Not a problem I've ever had. And so when you're new to it, I think a lot of people end up having to structure a lot of things. And I think COVID, being locked up in your house, working from home, was a huge struggle for a lot of people. Then there's being a digital nomad, which is not having a home at all, having your laptop under your arm, traveling around the world. And I did that for a couple of years, and then COVID hit and I had to stop. And the problem there is you meet a lot of people, but what I found is I didn't share any of my experience with anybody, and that's my regret, is that I thought I'll go around the world, it'd be really exciting. I went around the world twice, and it was really cool, met lots of people, did lots of things, but I don't have anybody I shared it with. And I think sharing experience is a huge part of being a human being.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that being a digital nomad and traveling off around the world on your own, you run that risk.
Now, on a slightly more positive note, going back to your music. So let's talk about, was it a punk rock band?
It was punk folk.
Folk.
So folk music played with a punk energy and punk style.
Okay.
So I played the double bass, which is an acoustic instrument, and we played, for example, a version of the Ace of Spades by Motorhead with a violin, a mandolin, double bass and drums. And it sounds huge. And you wouldn't believe that it was just these acoustic instruments and we were a folk band.
And no hurdy-gurdies.
No hurdy-gurdies, no. We had an accordion, we had a penny whistle, we had guitars, we had what else? Oh, we had a trumpet at one point. And it was lovely because what we had was a lot of energy, and we would take standard folk songs from America, from Eastern Europe, and then we would also take some songs like Motorhead songs.
Yeah.
And then we wrote some of our own, and it was all about energy, and it was all about punk attitude. And it lasted 10 years, and it was absolutely wonderful. Yeah. And we made a living. We made a very bad living, i.e. we didn't make much money. But we were traveling around Europe playing gigs for anything from one old man and his dog to 500 people or 1,000 people sometimes. But we never attracted 1,000 people. We did play festivals where there were up to, multiple thousands of people. We played one in Brittany. I remember it was a huge, huge tent. And I don't know how many people there were, 3,000 or 4,000. And then when we played gigs when we were the headlining band, it was maximum 500 people.
Yeah.
So we were a tiny bit famous, but not famous enough to actually make a long-term career, unfortunately.
Well, perhaps with social media and TikTok and SoundCloud, it might be time for a resurgence of punk folk. I'm guaranteed after this going to listen to it. So what I'd like you to do is share some links with me if the music is available anywhere, because I'm sure folks are be captivated by folk. And I'm a big folk music fan, so I'm definitely going to check that out. But I'm just sad there's no hurdy-gurdy, but I will take the accordion and the double bass. I also played the double bass at school. Not very well, but a big fan.
Well, I hope we haven't ruined folk music for you when you watch it. You'll think, oh no, that's not folk.
I take it if there are any photos, there'll be a bit more hair on your head, Jason, or you.
No, exactly the same. No, I had a little Tintin quiff, but I was still bald.
Great. Well, normally, I'd love to sign off with that piece of music of yours in the background. So maybe I'll sneakily try and do that if Google doesn't hit me for copyright infringement. But maybe we'll do that as to end of this chat.
Yeah. No, brilliant. And I'll send you the video links, and some people did some really good videos of us. There's some really kind of small bars with very bad sound, with somebody filming with a terrible camera in the 1990s. And then another one where it was a TV station in the east of France who recorded the whole thing with multiple cameras, and it looks so cool.
Oh, brilliant. And
I'm so proud of it, and I'm so glad they did that, because it gives me the memory of how it felt to do that. And there's honestly, no better feeling in the world other than perhaps having a child.
Yeah. Well, on that point, I'm just going to remind everyone to check out Jason's book on brand SERPs. I'm going to put that link. Yeah, I can see it there. I'm going to put some links up, and hopefully next time we can go through the 10 tips and tricks on brand SERPs to go into more detail. But this is really just to get to know you and hear a bit of your story. And thanks for spending time with us.
It was absolutely delightful. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the delightful conversation, Nicholas.
No problem. Cheers.
Come chat with Nicholas. He'll listen to you. Then he'll laugh, and then he'll cry with you. It's all in a safe space for you to speak your truth. Oh, come and share.